Good afternoon to you. There was this old country boy from North Carolina walking up a trail, had a bucket full of fish. Game warden stepped up behind the tree. Said, "You got a fishing license?" The old boy said, "No, I don't." Game warden said, "You're in a whole bunch of trouble." He said, "We're going to have to go down and put you in jail." The boy said, "No, now listen here." He said, "You got the story all wrong." He said, "These are my pet fish. I keep them in a bathtub in my backyard, and I've trained them. See, I got a whistle here. I bring them down to the pond every once in a while and let them stretch their leg and blow the whistle, and they're trained to come back and jump in my bucket." This is a true story now. Game warden said, "I'm not believing that. I just don't believe you there." He said, "You don't believe it? Come on and watch this." And they walked back down to the lake, and the old boy let the fish out there, and he's twiddling the whistle, twiddling the whistle. After a while, the game warden said, "Blow that whistle, bring those fish back." He said, "What fish?" Yesterday, we began this series of lecture on the CIA and my time overseas, some of my experiences and my comments from inside the CIA, living overseas undercover. I want to emphasize as we begin today that this is an opportunity afforded us because of the Royal Caribbean. Speaking about my experiences in the CIA is not something I do often or that anybody does. And to a crowd of this size, it's something I haven't done. I've spoken to a lot of civic groups and some reunions. So I appreciate the opportunity Royal Caribbean has given me to share with you some of the insides of the CIA, sort of to demystify it and give it sort of a human character. The gentleman on the screen behind me is a guy named Stu Metfin. If you were here yesterday, you remember I said I've got my heroes. My first hero is Hans Toffel, who went to Korea in July of 1950, and he put the CIA on the map. It gave the CIA a raison d'etre. And it proved to the policymakers back in Washington that there was a need for a civilian control intelligence operations overseas. I showed a diagram of the CIA, a schematic. At the very top was the DCI. It was my favorite of all the DCIs was Casey. Helms was on board as chief when I first came on in 1970. So the CIA really came to be about 1952. It was formed in 47, but it really didn't understand who it was or what it could do and couldn't do until after the Korean War got started, and Hans Toffel gave it some direction. From the DCI coming down in that schematic, you had 4 directorates. They call them deputy directorates for some reason, I don't know. The first was DDA, Deputy Directorate for Administration, that buy the computers and do some of the training and security and that kind of thing. And then the next was DDS&T, Deputy Directorate for Science and Technology. And they are the ones that did the U2 program, that did they carried most of the water in the development of the drones. We had that big debate about assassinations or not, and were bailed out by the National Security Council, who makes that decision. And I think for everybody concerned, it's the best way for that to work. The Glomar Explorer was a super successful, very ambitious operation by DDS&T to recover that Soviet submarine. Sort of the comic side of it was that the Soviet submarine went down about where the Japanese took off for their invasion of Pearl Harbor in '41. But the Russians didn't know where it went down. So they came out looking for it in rowboats and other boats and all kinds of boats. And our U.S. Navy in Hawaii was just jumping up and down. They said, "Oh, U.S. Navy is between us and California. They got aircraft carriers out there." And this was the shooting war going on in Vietnam. But they had to be given a leash. They had to go on, because if they'd been pacified that we knew what was going on, then it might have signaled to the Soviets that we were a step ahead of them. because secrecy was the whole thing. At one time, I know they had a bigger list of only about 12 people that we knew outside the agency of where that Soviet submarine went down. And a friend of Brenda's and mine was on the crew, mostly Cajun shrimpers, that went over the site, and the claws went down and picked it up. The next directorate is the Deputy Directorate of Intelligence. And I had a picture of Algonquin table, some cartoon. And I never explained to you what the Algonquin table had to do with the DDI. Although I did explain that there is a certain liability if you find yourself shoulder to shoulder with a DDI person and it comes up to some data or trivia quiz like Jeopardy. You know, just walk away, don't get involved, you're not going to win. And something like that happened in the cafeteria at Langley. Brenda, my wife, was also in the CIA, and a friend of ours, Jerry Falls, would have a gathering of interesting people all the time for lunch. So we'd sit around, and one day I was saying that I thought one of the reasons the Soviet Union went bankrupt is because we held the line in Vietnam for 10 years. And in 1975, when we finally bailed from South Vietnam, the Soviets were left with this military-industrial complex out of Moscow that got their best and the brightest. Almost the whole government was focused on supporting the Vietnamese. And so they had this big apparatus, and what did they do? They went to Afghanistan, and they got their shirts ripped. And they came back, and when they came back out of Afghanistan with their tails between their legs, there was one computer in Moscow in the private sector. All the other high tech was in the military-industrial complex. And I said, I think that's one of the reasons they declared bankrupt, because we held the line for 10 years, and they were sort of hoisted on their own petard. They developed this great big military machine to find out, you know, it got them in trouble in Afghanistan, and they just went broke. And across from me was this she was bigger than that. This lady sitting across, and I could tell in the first 3 words, no, that's not right. I knew I had run afoul of the DDI, and I was dealing with this person who was much smarter than I was. And she says, no. In her opinion, the reason the Soviet Union declared bankruptcy that's not very well known is because of Cary Grant and Audrey Hepburn and Henry Fonda. And of course she had everybody's attention now. Probably the table sitting around that were also listening in. And she said because VCRs came out in the late 70s. And they soon spread throughout the Soviet hinterland. Every village had its own VCR. And then the Hollywood movies started circulating. Not the movies from India, not the movies from Hong Kong. It was straight out of Hollywood. It was Rod Hudson and the other, Marilyn Monroe, and it was all that. And the Soviet people, she said, after a short period of time, said with one voice, if this is capitalism, I want some of it. If this is decadence, let me have some of it. And so that was the picture of the Algonquin table with Jerry Falls. Then I moved on before time began to run out and talked about the last director. Now there are 5. The 5th director we have now fights the cyber war. And it's set up with all the techies, and they speak in a language entirely different from the rest of us. But they're doing, I don't know how they're doing, but they are certainly doing, because the Soviets and the Chinese, and the Iranians, and the Israelis use thousands of people a day to find ways to hack the electronics of other countries in the world. And it takes some pretty ingenious, pretty smart thinking to stay ahead of our competition. Fortunately, the CIA is invested in Silicon Valley, so we go to the headwater of this electronic revolutions that we're a part of, and we're staying even with them. But they're piling on. There was a recent non-classified overflight of what used to be the KGB campus on the outskirts of Moscow. And there is massive massive construction going on. And they noticed that the size of the parking lot was 4 times the size of the previous parking lot, which gives you an indication of their focus and the way they're beefing up with their manpower. And a lot of that, you have to assume, is with in the cyber warfare. But in the 4th directorate, and that's the clandestine corps, for all the CIA is known for, most of that comes from the DDO, Deputy Director for Operations, where DDS&T, the DDI, also the yeoman hard labor in the intelligence field. The DDO is involved in HUMINT. I said the DDI collects intelligence from NSA, they collect intelligence from satellites, they collect intelligence from the open sources, and they also collect HUMINT intelligence. And you almost have to have, on almost any situation, on almost any intelligent estimates they make, you almost have to have the human element. We have to provide that human element to DDI analysis. We have stations around the world. Each station has its own OD, operating directive. And remember now, I'm quoting most of this from Ron Kessler's Inside the CIA, so this is not classified. Each station has an OD of 6 or 7 or 8 clearly written, short, key intelligence questions that station is supposed to be answering. And it's the yardstick against which the chief of station is judged at the end of his tour. How well did you answer those questions? So each station then around the world, in countries in which there is a national security link, will have an OD, a chief of station, and an OD and case officers. The case officers overseas have 3 jobs. Job 1 is to maintain their cover. You lose your cover and you have to come home. You lose your cover and you're no longer viable as an undercover agent overseas. Job 1, maintain your cover. And it's usually most of your daytime hours. But in your CIA work, you do it at night and during the lunch period and other times during the day. 2 jobs, 1 paycheck. Which brings up another reasons why you see so few of us guys who have been in the clandestine corps for a long period of time out speaking. It's because of another hero of mine. Hans Toffel is one of my first heroes. Howard Bain is another hero of mine. Very, very smart guy, who I suggested each one of you would want to have at your table tonight, because he can talk about anything, absolutely anything. He can take the high road and talk in iambic pentameter, or he can talk the low road and cuss like a sailor. But he said, we do this job in the clandestine corps, not for fame or fortune, but because we believe in the mission. And the mission of the clandestine corps is to maintain a watchful presence overseas. And that term is rarely used to describe what the CIA does. But as we taught new recruits into the clandestine corps recently, that really gets the core of what we do. We are the president's agents overseas, telling them what's really going on, telling them to be careful about this, telling them about the possibility of that. We don't have the media biases. We are the U.S. government, the intelligence communities, the president's eyes and ears overseas, maintaining a watchful presence. So the first job of the case officer overseas is to maintain your cover. Second job, to spot, assess, develop, and recruit foreign nationals who have access to information we're interested in. Information that will answer some of those key intelligence questions on the OD. So let's say you are given one of those questions to answer. You've come into the station, and the chief of station, you got number 4. So what do? Do you go ninja? You get in your black robes and those little starry things they throw, and hunker down and jump over fences and climb walls and go into office and open safes and get the information? No. You go in and identify people who have access to that information legitimately, and you seek their cooperation. And there's a process we go through. And we go through that process on our side, hand in hand with headquarters. There are no wild elephants out there. There is no, there is a free-flowing spying. We go by the book, pretty much. again, by the book, and again, no rogue elephants in the CIA. There is a division of labor between the FBI and CIA. FBI has domestic intelligence responsibility in the United States, inside the United States. CIA is outside of the United States. When we come into, fly over U.S. Borders, then our responsibility is in, and we defer to the FBI. Doesn't necessarily go the other way. The FBI sort of wants the bit in their mouth when they go overseas. But when they get involved in intelligence operations, they do give primacy to our chief of stations overseas. But there is a clear division of labor. Don't blame the CIA for anything that happens in the United States because we're not involved, not anymore. Not that we ever were, that I know of. And the FBI has that inside, we are outside. Another thing that we abide by, absolutely, you know, they take the birth certificate of our firstborn. And if we break that, they're going to take our firstborn away. And that is, we do not use any subterfuge with U.S. citizens. If we're overseas going through an operation, we're trying to get at somebody who has access to this very important information. And along our course, as we try to bring that person into the fold, we run into a U.S. citizen, we have to back off. We cannot use any subterfuge other than maintaining our cover with the U.S. Citizen. So if you think at any time you've been involved in a CIA operation overseas, probably you are not, because the CIA absolutely will not do anything that involves a U.S. citizen in which they are not completely honest, in which they don't, in which they will make the person aware of the fact that they are involved in a CIA operation. The spotting, the recruiting, the developing of a foreign national, we learned at the farm, but there are some people that are just better at it. The agency goes to great lengths to recruit personalities that are likable, that are persuasive, that will attract other people. They're looking for people with leadership ability. The gentleman whose picture is on the big board here is Stu Medford, and he is the third hero that I will talk about. Stu Medford, I think, graduated from Amherst, and he went to do graduate work at MIT, although he graduated with an MBA from Harvard. So he was smart on smart. But he was also very glib, and he had a persuasive manner about it. And he had presence. I think there were electrons circling around his body or something. If he were in a crowd of people, the people are going to be in that circle are going to be looking at Stu Medford as they talk. They're talking to him. Kings, presidents, I don't care. If Stu Medford is standing in the circle, they're going to be looking at Stu to get his approval. And he was very persuasive, and he was an excellent writer. Stu Medford is my definition of the perfect CIA case officer because of that winning, persuasive way he had. And he could assess a person in 2 or 3 meetings that would take a new guy 8 or 9 meetings to try and determine their vulnerabilities. And we all have our vulnerabilities. Some of us don't know what it is exactly, but everybody in the sound of my voice is vulnerable to being recruited. Whether it's recognition, whether it's money, whatever it is, we can be there. And the case officer who is on point then, who is meeting this person and is assessing him, is sending all that information back to Washington. So it's not just on your call that you're basing the vulnerability assessment on. It's all of headquarters. So in that sense, it's like a triangle that's coming down on the target. So you have resources of hundreds behind you professionally as you're bringing the person along. Recruitment of foreign nationals is sometimes very easy. We don't realize always what a great country we have and how honest we are as a government, and how straightforward we are as a government, and how people around the world admire Americans. Not all leaders around the world admire Americans, but for the most part, people admire the American culture. And when you appeal to people on that level, you'd be surprised how much support you get from them, and then making them take the next step and the next step, and you tell them that cooperating is in their best interest. It's the best thing for them to do. if you won their confidence, then taking those next 2 or 3 steps, Stu Mitford could do it in 1 step. And you would feel so grateful that he asked you to help. He had that way about it. And writing, in obstacle, when I had been in, remember the story about my 15 minutes of fame when I was sitting on the desk? And then it was before computers, and there would, you'd come in the morning, there'd be a stack that high of cables from the field. And you'd go through it. Some of them would be action for the headquarters officers. But, you know, after a while, although it's pretty sexy stuff, it's pretty interesting stuff. But after a while, you just, until you ran across the Stu Mitford cable. And it was like, somebody turned on the lights. Like the fluorescent lights just got turned up. Because he spoke with such clarity. And he had this frame of mind which was so persuasive. He would get his idea out there to you in the first sentence of the first paragraph. And then he started something that is still in effect today. He started at the very top, action required. He'd send a message back to headquarters, action required. And this is what he would want in the way of support from headquarters. And sometimes we make a proposal, consideration of proposal outlined below. Whereas there were other people from the field making similar proposals or making operational proposals. They would get overlooked because there was so much verbiage. With Stu, he went right to the meat, and people bought into it and moved ahead. Once you recruited somebody, then the hard work began, and that's handling somebody in a foreign country. And that's almost like running patrols in Vietnam. But that's when you earn your keep. When you lay your fingers on a typewriter and begin to type up that intel cable, is with the first time that you are working for you guys, the taxpayers. Typing up that intel cable is the first opportunity to give you guys a return on your investment of me in training, in return on the expense of me recruiting somebody, because I'm sending something back to the intelligence community and to the Washington, and to the president. And it instills in you a great sense of importance, that this is the way it is. And you're telling the people back in Washington, this is the way it is. Regardless of what the newspaper says, this is what my man says. And how you get that information from your asset, often we have car meetings, and the end will be for 15 or 20 minutes. He will tell you first what information he has. You'll tell him what you want to do. You'll set up your next meeting. So for 15 minutes, you have to listen to some authority. And I'm going to speak on that towards the end of this series of lectures, about the importance of listening in our line of work, where you have to remember almost everything said. You can't give them a call later on and say, did you say 5 or did you say 15? But anyway, that's the DDO. Our job is to maintain a watchful presence overseas, and for the most part, it can be tedious. And the most important thing we do is to meet those agents and to get that intel report. And that takes focus. It takes no monkeying around. You have to do your, to make sure you're not followed. You have to meet the agent outside of video cameras. You have to reassure the agent that he's doing the right thing. You have to get that information. You have to vet it at the time you bring it in on board. You have to come back and write it up. That's the work of the DDO. And pretty much that's the inside gut of the CIA. I'm going to talk a little bit now, and that's where I should have ended up yesterday, although it's taken me 20 minutes today to finish up from yesterday. My wife was in the CIA. I first met the recruiter, I think in '69 sometime, but it was August of 1974 I came on board. In all the investigation of me, though, since we were married, they investigated her. I went into Washington, went right into training, and she put in her application to the CIA, and 2 months later she was hired. Now, what is this? They took 8 months to check me out, and she gets on for, she gets recruited in 2 months, but she liked the CIA. The CIA isn't for everyone. There are strict rules of etiquette, the things you can do and can't do. She loved it. She thrived in the CIA. But when I received my orders overseas, my first orders in the CIA, it was for upcountry Laos. So she packed her bags and came along with me. This is her interim duty picture. But overseas in Udon, where we stopped first, we got there in November, late November of 1971. And they were building up for a big fight that was going to launch about 17 December up in the country. So they kept me down in Udon to help write the reports. And Brenda was sort of left her own devices. She found her house in the economy. She's from Sanford, North Carolina. Anybody been to Sanford? You know how big Sanford is? I think there are more people on this ship that live in Sanford, North Carolina. But she adjusted, she acclimated right away. She went out and found a house, hired a maid. But we didn't move into it because we wanted some changes. We were still living in the Sharon Hotel when Christmas came around. And the fight was going hot and heavy up country. I'd been working, I don't know, long hours up at the office at my desk before the sun came up, and I wouldn't get back until 9. So for Christmas morning, we went to my boss's house for brunch, and we're going back to the hotel. Just no place else to do. We're not going to a bar or hotel. Brenda says, "Where are we going?" And I said, "We're going back to the hotel. That's where we live." She says, "No, we're not." She said, "I am not going to go sit in the lobby of a hotel on Christmas Day." She said, "I feel like a refugee. And I'm not going to go up in that room. And I'm not going to go to the swimming pool. So what are we going to do?" So we went down to the market, we got some fruit, and we went out to the orphanage. And we parked in the parking lot, and as we were walking to the orphanage, the Catholic orphanage in the back, we were mobbed by kids. The place was filthy with kids. Dozens and dozens of kids. Kids grabbed every finger on our hands, bringing us in. And all we had was just a little bit of fruit, some bananas and oranges and apples. And we met a nun as we got to the door of the orphanage. The story I'm telling you now is I think, part of Brenda's evolution as a person, in which I saw love. So the end of this little story is when I saw the emotion love. So we get to the edge of the orphanage, and this nun there welcomed us, and we said, "We are so sorry. All we have is some bananas and some oranges." And she said, "Just being here is the best present for these kids. They love you guys being here for Christmas." And she said, "The Air Force Santa Claus is going to be here soon, and they're bringing ice cream and cake, and there's going to be presents for every kid." So they're just excited. So they're leading us through the orphanage to the back where the Air Force Santa Claus is going to be arriving soon. And we passed by the nursery. And there's one little kid in there. And these bassinets were hinged on the mother of the kid. So this one little fellow is swinging back and forth. And Brenda says to the nun, "Why is he in there? And all the rest of these kids are out here." And she said, "Well, I didn't even realize he was standing up yet. He was almost 2, but he was brought to the orphanage when he had a big growth on his stomach. And they expected him not to live, but he did, and they sent him down to Bangkok. They took the growth off, brought him back, and he was still on his back. And it had only been a day or 2, apparently, when he'd been standing up. For the whole world before was this, horizontal. Now it's vertical. He's standing up. He's got a sourpuss look on his face. So Brenda said, "Can I bring him back in the back for the Christmas party?" And the nun said, "Go ahead." So this little guy has got this frown on his face. And then this big, gawky woman comes wandering up. His eyes suddenly get that big, and she gets to his crib, and she reaches down and picks him up, and he tries to push her off, but then he sort of settles in. He sort of liked being there right up. We went out in the back, and all the kids wanted to play, and then the Air Force Santa Claus came, and they had all these presents to show us, and they were jumping up and down. And Brenda went to move the little boy off her hip to the picnic table that we were sitting at, and he cried out to her and raised his arm. They wanted to be picked up, and the deal was done. Our uses were good. So the fighting, I was still very busy, but Brenda went back the next day to see the little guy, and she went back probably every other day or every 3rd day for about 10 days, 2 weeks, until I had a chance to go by. But Brenda was telling me stories now, rather than going out looking for a house. She's talking about this little Ronnie kid, and she was saying, I think he recognizes me when I come in. I think he enjoys me as much as I enjoy him. So we were going by to try and take him home for the night, and this is now will be the 2nd time that I've seen him, but for Brenda maybe the 5th. So we go to the orphanage. She goes in to see the nun to ask about taking this little runt home. And I went walking on back to the nursery. And I was there looking around. How does she know which one of these little Asian kids, is there a special one? Because they're all sort of laying down. Had no idea who it was until out in the hall, you could hear Brenda coming our way. You could hear her voice, and you could hear her footfalls. And suddenly, in the middle of that orphanage, one little kid shot up like that. And then he leaned to the side so that he could see her coming around. Just, you could catch her an inch or two. So he's leaning off to the side. And Brenda came around the corner. And the look on that kid's face, that was pure love. That little kid was saying with everything he owned, I love you. I am so happy to see you. And that was our son Joseph. This was taken 2 days after we adopted his sister, which is another long story. She sort of came from the economy. A man knocked on our door. He was going back to the States. He was the foster father of this American Asian little girl, and he was trying to find a home, and he was successful. Eventually, the fight-in reached a point, and I went up north. They needed some extra bodies for the enemy to shoot at. So I would stay up, I would get in late at night, and there would be the kids that would come up to him. But Brenda eventually moved because of fear that Nim's natural mother was going to come back and snatch her. We moved across the river from Udorn to Vientiane Chin Laos. And here are the two kids. I would come down from up country where I was working with Hmong guerrillas. And I would come down every 2 weeks or so. And to come down to Vientiane Chin, I'd have to get on a helicopter about mid-afternoon. And that's where we were making the medevac, sort of working the battlefield, bringing people in. So I'd sometimes come in with blood on my fatigues, and Brenda would have all the lights in the house, she and the kids. Each kid had his own light to turn on. Every light in the house, the refrigerator door would be open. So the light in the refrigerator would be open. And she'd have Walt Disney musicals playing on the reel-to-reel. And it was always this celebration when I came in. This is at a Halloween party at the American School in Vientiane Chin. That was 2 years in Laos and Vientiane Chin, and I think if we could hold time still, that Brenda would still be there. It was for her. I enjoyed my job so much. Not the warring part so much as the team that we had, working with the Hmong, working with the Thai, working with the Air Force, working with Air America. It was just a great adventure for me, and I'm going to talk more about that tomorrow in some detail. Though today, I want to spend most of it today talking about Brenda's experiences. So we finished up 2 years there. There was a Laos ceasefire. The fighting was over. We had to put down our guns up with the Hmong guerrillas, and the Thai Han Suo Pran went back to Thailand. And I received my orders for Vietnam, which was good. I was anxious to go back to Vietnam. Remember, I went there initially 65, 66 as a GI. And the word that was reaching us in Laos is that after the military had pulled out, there were a bunch of place sitters coming in, people who had no vested interest in the war. There was just an odd collection of people at the American Embassy, and that they didn't have any sweat equity in the U.S. involvement in Vietnam. So I was back, I think, drawn to a certain extent by my experience in the military before, and protecting the honor of those men that I knew who had died there. But also it was a venture that called out clearly to me. So I was going to go to Vietnam. So we traveled through Hawaii on the way back with the kids. And Joe Glasgow, a friend, said, "Listen, Parker," my call sign was Mule. "Listen, Mule." He said, "You're going to go through Hawaii with your family only so many times." He said, "Don't go travel lodge. Go first class." So we found first class to be the Kahala Hilton. Anybody stay in the Kahala Hilton on Oahu? That's where we stayed. This was, after we left Laos, we stopped at the Kahala Hilton. And it became our stopover. Kahala Hilton is where we stopped as we crossed the Pacific. So here we are, heading from Laos back home. to United States for a month or 2 months. This is when we came back. Brenda was going to stay in Taiwan, Taipei, when I was in Vietnam. And she first was down in what they call Mortuary Manor, which was really a choice place until the kids found out there's a mortuary at the end of the street, so they wanted no part of it. So she moved to the top of Yangmingshan, where it is an old army encampment, but where a lot of dependent wives would stay, and she was very happy there. And that picture shows her and the kids on this overlook of Yangmingshan, and that's Taipei in the background. I flew down to Saigon and was assigned to the Delta. And as had been, as we'd heard in Laos, the embassy staff, I was not impressed with. They had no calluses on their hand. They had no experience in the field, and they were all sort of enclosed in that embassy. What they knew about Vietnam was inside the embassy. They had few. I came from 2 years totally immersed with the Hmong and with the Thais, upcountry Laos. And when we went to Vietnam, expecting people with the same kind of experience with the Vietnamese, nobody had any close contact except their maids and their girlfriends. I was not impressed with the American embassy, and even with the CIA station. It was like a home, something for the States that had been transported to Vietnam, lock, stock, and barrel. I was assigned down into the Delta, and would get back every 2 months or so. And eventually I was evacuated. A day after tomorrow, I want to tell you about the evacuation and those hectic last 2 or 3 months when Brenda had no idea where I was. When everybody had been reported, all that group of girls that she lived with, reported that their husbands were safe, only Brenda's guy had not been found because I was on a merchant marine ship, a cargo ship. And the women started coming in and staying with her 24/7. And some of them were a basket case. But Brenda somehow knew I was going to be okay. You know, I was this old country boy with a bucket full of fish or something. I was going to be all right. You know, I was going to blow my whistle and everything was going to be okay. So she had to soothe the caregivers with her until I finally got in the Philippines and wrote to Senator Telex that I was okay being on set. We came back to headquarters. Now she'd worked some along the way. She came back to headquarters, this girl who had really enjoyed herself when she first came on. And she got a job with the Director of Security. Now that has a meaning that strikes fear in the hearts of CIA people. The Director of Security is our internal police. You get in trouble with the security for leaving a safe open or saying something you shouldn't say to a neighbor and you get him back to the CIA, Chief of Security will be down there on your neck. Now, another thing too at this time when we came back, everybody's badge had the picture. You saw pictures of Brenda. She looked pretty good. And right below that she would have her 2-digit letters. Mine was GK734. And then a picture of me, and I looked like that boy with a bucket full of fish. But I had a newbie badge, and then there was nothing on my badge except my picture of GK734. This was at a time, if you had different security clearances, you would get a different color letter in a different location around your badge. So if you were privy to a very sensitive Chinese operation, it could be a green G at 10 o'clock. Or if there was something going on in France, it could be a blue K at 5 o'clock. Brenda worked for the Chief of Security. Hers looked like Christmas decorations. You wouldn't walk down the hall with Brenda. You know, and she was a wealthy woman in our world with all those colored letters that she had around her neck. And my first assignment, they sent me to French for a year. I was sitting on the desk for a year when I had met Stu Methvin and was recruited by Stu Methvin and fell in love with Stu Methvin as my idea of the perfect case officer. And it came up time for an assignment, and we got assigned to Africa because of Miss Brenda's badge of many colors. what had happened is that in this country in Africa that I cannot give you the name of, is that the chief of station was shaking hands with a delegation of people one night at the end of the party, and his hand came away from the last guy in the line with a little piece of paper. And out in his car, he almost dropped it. Out of the car, he opened it up, and the guy was suggesting a time and place to meet. Now, we get dangled all the time. The CIA gets jerked around all the time. You never take a person at his word. You never take an invitation like this guy wants to cooperate with us at his word. So, for that meeting, which was in a parking lot, we probably had 20 CIA guys, top of every tree, behind every trash can, to make sure we weren't being set up. And the guy he was true to his words. There are a lot of reasons why some people defect. Some people flip. Some people work for the other side. Some of it is gamesmanship. They just like the high adrenaline, risk-taking rush of playing both ends against each other. And that was this guy's motivations. He was just gaming. But he was very, very valuable. He had brought in some very, very useful. But he wanted to stay in place for a period of time. He had his plan. So the CIA wanted to get the best situation for him. So we were going over for Brendan to run a safe house, known only to him, that if he got in trouble, if anything was amiss, he knew where the house was, and all he had to do was get to that house, and there would be Brendan to look after him. And I went along to the deputy chief of station. But she was the principal that went over there. Now, when you get an assignment overseas, you have a lot to do, and then it will come down to a notepad. Now, for me, there were two things in my notepad. One was to get the passports. We had to get special passports to go over. And two was to buy a new car, because somebody said, you go to this part of Africa, and your car breaks down. That's it. Put it up on blocks. And, the show is over. The party is over. By the time you get parts in and find somebody who knows how to put them in, that's 2 years. Buy a brand new car. Chances are they won't break down in 2 years. So my son and I, he was about 7 or 8, and my job was to find a car, buy a brand new car, and then inside. In those James Bond movies, when James Bond goes out on an assignment, who is it, this Kitty Barker or somebody, hands him his passports and the keys to his sports car and all that? No, that's not the way it is. For me, they don't have me nothing. You go down and say Sally down in passports. And the last person I remember as we went on this assignment, somebody running after me. Your parking pass. Never happened in James Bond movies. So anyway, Brenda she quit work for the chief of security, and she's at home and she's getting piles in the house. She's got 7 piles in the house. Pile 1 is throwaway. Pile 2 is giveaway to Salvation Army. Pile 3 is to store here in the United States. Pile 4 is to send air freight overseas. Pile 5, send by ocean freight. Pile 6 is to take with us. She had piles around the house. And she and me and my daughter were just fixated on these piles. Plus, they're making these crazy concocted suppers because you're trying to get rid of all the perishable food. You'd have, I don't know, Wheaties and baked beans and stuff, crazy. So she does a better job at what she's doing than I did. I never got the passports. The last day, the woman keeps saying, don't bug me anymore. I'll let you know when your passports come in. Don't worry. So, and the car, she had all of her ideas about how she wanted to fancy that car up, accessorize that car. They had to get one from the factory. So we're waiting for the car. Car came in the last possible day. This is a true story. The next day, the ship is going to leave from Baltimore. Car came in. I think they were playing with the auto dealership. So I had to drive it up to Baltimore and take the train back. And the passports are still on. But she's getting her list and she's getting people in. The home movers are coming in with the furniture, and then the guys for sea freight, the guys for the air freight. And she gets down to what it's going to be, the stuff we're going to carry with us, and the plants. She's going to leave with her mother. So we found we had more plants than we planned for. So we have these 2 rods to put in the suitcases. We can carry 2 suitcases each. That's 8 suitcases. So it's Brenda and I, the 2 kids and the dog, and 8 suitcases on the top. Well, I didn't have enough rope to tie them all real good, and it looks something like this. But we're going into the wind, so I really made it strong in the back because we're going into the wind, right? We get down out of Washington, close to Richmond, and Brenda says the dog had to pee. How she knew the dog had to pee? I don't know. But we get out, and sure enough, the dog has to pee. We get back up there. Now, she had been riding side saddle. 2 kids in the bucket seat here, and the dog in the footwell. So she decides she's going to ride that console like a cowboy all the way down to North Carolina. So I'm right behind the wheels, 2 kids are in there, the dog's over there, and Brenda's getting a scrawny little butt fixed on this little pillow she's got on the console. And I'm looking on traffic on 95. There's heavy traffic on 95, friends. Heavy traffic. When she slams down on the accelerator. Shoom! I'm in the middle of traffic. So what do? Slam on brakes? What happened to the suitcase? All across 95. So we got all the stuff off. I pulled the car on the road. I made everybody stand aside. So I'm out there dodging trucks and all that. Got all the stuff on the side. Pulled everything back in. I still don't have any more rope. We had some suitcases hung on just by their handle. Got the dog in, but I tied the doors shut too. So I got the dog in, got the kids in, got her in, and then I'm climbing in the thing. Now all the plants have shoved to the front, right? So I finally get in settled. And it's like I'm driving from a bush because the plants are around. And she can't stop laughing. She won't stop laughing. And I'm getting madder and she can't laugh. And then finally she stopped laughing. We just all the way down to North Carolina. But she was to get her comeuppance. Because after we'd been down in North Carolina a week or 2, and that lady who was to get the passports called up and said, well, the guy that's going to sign for the passport, what happened to my is coming back, and this is what you're going to do. I've got your air tickets, airline tickets. You're going to fly, you, Mr. Nero, Mr. Parker. You're going to fly from North Carolina into Washington. You can go over to Foggy Bottom, State Department. You're going to get your passports. You can come back. You're going to fly up to LaGuardia International Airport. At the same time, it's the lady on the telephone. At the same time, your wife is going to leave from North Carolina and fly directly to LaGuardia. So you'll have separate paths in the morning, link up at LaGuardia, go to Africa, and the world is a better place. Brenda's at the airport. She has a lot of relatives. She's got the dog, she's got the 2 kids, she's got Joe's fishing poles, and she's got a bag of popcorn that somebody gave her. And she wants to go. She's tired. She just wants to go. And finally the Eastern person says, Eastern flight for New York is now loaded. And she said, oh, thank God. I'll save you the Aunt Georgia story, which is a great side story to this. But she goes on, and she gets on the plane, and they buckle her up. And she's looking out the window at all of her relatives. It must have been 300. They were looking back at her. The plane takes off. And the story says, welcome to Eastern flight, whatever, for New York. Did you say New York? And no, we went to Newark. And she said, oh no, she got on the wrong plane. It's a carefully constructed flight. But fortunately it landed at Kennedy National, and she got on the Eastern shuttle. But landed now at the domestic airport. What's the domestic in New York? Huh? LaGuardia. So she's down in LaGuardia. I'm over there eating an apple, waiting outside the gate in the international airport. And this guy that was taking sympathy, so he rushes her out because the dog's already been checked through. So Brenda's still with her popcorn, still with the fishing pole, the 2 kids. They go out. He gets her in her sedan, this Good Samaritan does, and he leaves. When a bus pulls up, and the bus driver gets out, and he comes up to the sedan driver and said, you're poaching my customer. She was standing in a bus loading zone. She has to get out of the car and get on my bus. And they're talking back and forth. And they use a pretty rough language. Now, Miss Brenda is a nice lady if you ever meet her. But you do not use the F word around my house. You do not use the F word anywhere. Well, one of these guys used the F word. And suddenly for my son, who was 8 years old,
This was the most important thing. This man used the F word in front of Brenda. But anyway, Brenda got on the bus with the kids and the stuff, and she finally got to LaGuardia. And I had arrived. I was sort of late getting there, and I went on, and there's nobody there. The plane's going to be leaving. I said, where's Brenda? Where are the kids? And I went walking back out, and down the hall, I could see them coming towards me. Because she had these fishing poles. So you could see her in a crowd. You see her and she had that popcorn which was flowing out behind her as she ran. And the kids are running, like 7 and 8 year olds are running. And she's coming along with a stork with the fishing poles and the popcorn. And she finally got there. And my son said, this man said the F word. So we got on and went. And I have to cut it short here. But 2 years in Africa, the guy showed up 4 times. Now you have to understand, Brenda, and all 4 times she served by herself. Now this is his safety net. Is he running away, or people right on his tails? Is this going to be something brought out of a movie where she's going to be responsible for keeping this guy safe? She didn't know that the 4 times he showed up. And the 4 times he showed up, that was not the case. He just came by to bring us some information. But if you were to ask my wife, what were some of the most exciting times of your life? She'll say, well, that honeymoon, that was pretty good.
10 minutes, Mr. Parker.
But the 4 times...
10 minutes.
Huh?
10 minutes.
But the 4 times that Eddie showed up. And I'll tell you the story about John Sherman, my side of this tomorrow. The time's up. Please join me again tomorrow at the same time. I think we've got an extra 30 minutes. I've got some calling cards here if you guys ever want to applaud my wife. She put up with all these things. Thank you very much. Yes, but she told me the story.
Yes.